and there's always room for development. But I do think the most important role for the film scoring program in Denmark is that we are there in the development of the film from the early beginning. So we talk about the music and how the music should work in film, and we do the sketching, and we are on the location recording. And I think there's always a lot of problems along the way. But my main job is to just support all these kinds of problems that arises, and help with the experience that I have from my own work and from my teaching and from seeing films being developed over the years. But yeah, I think in Denmark it's becoming much better at the moment. At the moment we are located at the film school. We are not in the area, but we are there, and we have our own room, and yeah. So the cooperation between colleagues is getting better at the moment, but there's problems. Yeah.
Are any of you experiencing troubles with the collaborations? Are you, or maybe even political differences between institutions? I know from my experience in conservatories in Germany that was sometimes an issue, but is there maybe some interesting things to share in that regard?
Our program actually works out quite well, and maybe that is because of people actually don't trying to, setting an agenda too much. So, and that's one of the reasons. It has worked fairly well, but there are still many problems working with other institutions. And my personal experience of trying to work with other schools in other types of classes are that it often doesn't work. But for us it works really well, and that's because the students actually are taking classes at the film school. So they are actually students at that place too.
Mingling.
And there is a process going on, because when the students learn that how much they can get from working with a composer, as opposed to work with as a music library. A music library will never give you any resistance. Composers will, and that is so developing for everybody. And they eventually, what we experience when the composers have had, when directors have had the composers in the first class, second class, and third year, and if they all of a sudden have to work with the music library, no, they don't want to do that. And because they get used to work with composer, and that's so important. When they get out in the real world, they have to work with music libraries, but then they know what to ask for and how to work with music libraries. But they have this resistance through their education, which I think is very important. And I see as the students get more hooked up with composers, the administration is following after, but it takes a little more time.
Yeah, that's fair. In Iceland, do you see something similar like that? Can you develop working, meaningful collaborations? I think institutionally you could be a little bit isolated from other institutions, perhaps, or.
Yeah, it's kind of strange because, of course, there has been the Icelandic Film School. I don't remember exactly when it was established, but it's probably like 15, 20 years ago. But for some reason, there's never been like an official, well, almost never been any official collaboration between the two institutions. And the reason for that is, I don't really know why. I mean, I don't know if it's because it wasn't deemed necessary, because of course Iceland is quite small, and usually there was some link between film students and the composers. I mean, just in my personal experience, when I did my bachelor's in Iceland, like 2 of my best friends were already in the film school. So I imagine that's the case for a lot of people. But since we don't have any specific program, then just if composition students are interested in composing for films, then usually people would just reach out and like make contact, even though it wasn't maybe in like an official sense. So it was more like, yeah, just friendly chit chat, and a lot of good things have come from that.
Sort of, yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Maybe now. Yes, technology. Did I say this under the music technology department, right? So just wanted to comment on these collaboration between different institutions. So with the Sibelius Academy, they have pretty strong collaboration with another university, the Aalto University. So there's a lot of sound design studies in the different university, and there's nice collaboration between the sound design and sort of that realm and the music composition. So not fully answering the sort of film umbrella, but that's also, I think, a very important angle when you work with film, is that you often work together with the sound designer, and especially nowadays with the aesthetic being, you know, more towards perhaps some drone-y stuff and sound designy stuff. I think the sort of the line between music and sound design becomes a little bit of a blurry thing. So I think it's a really good thing that there's also collaboration between the students of who create sound design and work with sound, and who work with music. And this is something that's happening in Finland with the Sibelius Academy and the Aalto University. But I think I agree with you. So I think could be like more collaboration still with the film schools especially, but this is something that's already going on strong, and there are students who work with the same classes from sound design and from the music composition point, which I think prepares well for the film work in the real world.
With Tuomas, actually, it's very interesting that you talked a little bit about the technical focus, and it kind of leads me to the next kind of topic of conversation, and that is the balance, the educational balance between creativity and technology, and how important it is to find the right balance and decide institutionally what the emphasis should be on. Teaching just the technical aspects of film music, just it's lovely. That was really good. A sound designer's delight. So teaching how to record such lovely sounds like this actually can be an education in itself. Yet there's this other aspect of creativity, the way that every creative artist develop, that can take a totally different set of educational potentials. Like, did you decide to focus on, I think you mentioned technical aspects of your program, or was that an imperative that came along with your institution, or how does that work?
It's sort of a combination of both. So sort of when the first film music classes started, it was sort of like, okay, where do we put these film music courses? And that was sort of like the nice place for that. So and this is connected to how the courses are funded, and you know all that side. So it was both like a practical, but also like a philosophical decision. And I think nowadays it's more. It feels like it's more and more the right place actually for film music, because technology has advanced so much in the last 30 years, and it's going at an incredible pace. And we're talking about the future of film music. I think, you know, the role of technology will just keep on increasing. So what's happening currently with like AI generated pictures, and now you see these videos, and now you have Google making music LM, who creates music just with like textual input. And when you read the you know Facebook groups, and like, that's never going to happen in music because there's always the soul of the music, and they're like, I don't know about that, you know, let's see what happens. So I think we have to be like super like riding the way of the technology, because otherwise it's just gonna go past. So I think actually music technology nowadays seems to be actually quite a good place for the film music to be. So you are at least sort of up to date on what's going on there. And I see that perhaps the role of the composer is also going a bit more towards like curating and like the aesthetics, rather than, you know, orchestrating every single note and you know, playing themes with the piano and taking that to the director. So it's more like technology is creating more and more stuff. So what's the role of the composer actually? So are we headed more towards like curating things and create me this kind of materials and let's see where it goes. So music technology, I think it's just going to play a bigger and bigger part, like it or not.
I was going to actually invite you to make a comment on this specifically because I know that there's more of an emphasis on the compositional backgrounds that apply to film music in your program. Is that correct? Or it's more like an evolutionary practice?
Yeah, you could say that, but actually what we stress the most is, the collaboration between the media and the music, the narrative, so to speak. That's what we emphasize on altogether, I would say. It's, we have a master's program and the students need to have a bachelor in music, but when they come to the master's program, many of them don't have a clue about film scoring, really. So we actually have to make a kind of a bachelor in film scoring for the master students in a way, and focusing mainly on the narrative because that's so hard. So it's the narrative. You need to understand how to use the narrative in music, and you also need to collaborate. I would say it's in that order. You need first to understand the narrative, how it works, and try it out, and then also collaborate with it. Extremely tough, but that's what we do. We don't teach music, really. Just like you said. I never talk about notes or chords. Almost.
And are these contrasting? Are these contrasting views, or are they just different ways of looking at the same kind of way of educating media music composers? Because I think the elephant in the room is kind of, if you teach how the machines work, then and then you want to teach like how the aesthetics of the machines work. Aren't those totally different things?
I don't think so. I think it's very much complementary. So when you say narrative, I fully agree with that, and I think it connects with sort of, like I mentioned, the aesthetics and the role of the composer. Right? And if we're scoring for film or beat games or film, the narrative and the emotion, it's all there. So I guess it's more, the technology is more about the means of creating the ideas and sort of supporting the narrative. So I think it's very much complementary rather than contrasting.
Of course, technology is really important. You need to actually be a music producer in some sense. You could be this in many different ways. But it's also very important. But you can never, as you said, technology is developing so fast. So we try to be in front of that. But it's really, really hard to be that. It's really, really hard. And also the technology actually fools you lots of time. An ordinary DAW would imply to you to use certain tempos and stuff like that. So I think it's a good way to see it the other way around. The narrative is always first.
So in that vein, by what means do we evaluate, like what is the best process? Is it by what we like to hear? The machines, we engage them and they produce something and we say, oh, that's nice? Or do we actually fundamentally need to know what it is that they're doing, or what it is that they've created, the software and the machines and the techniques? Do we need to know what it is that they're doing or not?
I think it depends on what kind of music you're working with, what kind of genre. If you work with acoustic music, it's probably different than if you work with traditional classical music. So it depends on what kind of music that you're working on the specific project. I do think that about the question about institutional wise, if you want to learn, have a strategy of teaching in technology. I think it's very difficult on an institutional level in a way, because it's up to the individual students if they are motivated by it or not. Some students are very much into electronics, and some students are very much into classical, and you have to grab that, and you have to motivate them with different teachers and different ways of motivate them, and that's the part, that's the role as a teacher, to see that. And yeah.
And I think, Halldor, for example, you emphasize particularly that you encourage almost non-musical individuals. You encourage them to, embrace their music from a non-dogmatic sense.
Yeah. To quote Richard Bellis, who has been a guest lecturer for us from Hollywood for 9 years, he says, film music is not a kind of music. Tango is a kind of music. Jazz is a kind of music. Film music is not a kind of music. That means any genre is valuable in film as long as it supports the narrative. He says. But and I couldn't. That's the way of thinking.
Kind of moving a little bit onto the sort of political bits that are really interesting to me. I'm wondering particularly, as film music educators, we certainly influence the industry, and we influence, of course, by encouraging students to achieve their best. But at the same time, a little bit of what we're doing and a little bit of what we're applying is in these new emerging art forms, these new emerging talents, right? So how are we dealing with politics at the moment? There are enormous troubles in the cultural scene, and gender and race is a significant issue in our industry as well. Are we finding ways to deal with that?
At our school, we have these documents telling us what to do, right? Of course, that's in them, the gender and equality thing. We need to address those things. But at the same time, we don't choose students after their gender or whatever. We can't do that. We can only be happy when we get applicants that come from a good variety of backgrounds. But actually, the applicants don't really do that. Though we are quite happy with having around 10 to 20% female applicants. And I think that's fairly okay for now, since that's about what we see, I think, in the industry and in many other cultural spots too. But I certainly hope for this being changed at some point. But I say it again, we don't choose the applicants from their background. It's just their art that we evaluate.
Could I just ask, just from my own curiosity, actually all of your programs are state funded. Is that a contingency of that? Like, is that attached to the social aspect of the education, or not? That they have to, that you're not allowed to pick and choose based upon gender or race or other factors, or is that completely not spoken about? I'm just wondering, out of curiosity, if you're being influenced by other political agencies or maybe even other parts of the institutions. And I should say, very briefly, that normally these discussions are kind of closed door. So it's interesting that we can talk about this in public, but I feel like that's an important thing to talk about.
We are absolutely influenced by the state regarding that matter, which in this case I find is a good thing, because it's it's sent out to all the schools. Then there are other subjects where the state try to rule us. That is not just as good, but anyway.
Go ahead.
Well, it's just concerning the gender question. What we try to do in Denmark is we try to motivate to get enough students to apply for the program. Because over the years it's been it's been like 10% women and 90% men. But I can't give you the numbers now, but it has changed this year but it's not public. But it has definitely changed to the better. Yeah, definitely, and it's because of motivating. Yeah.
So we are running close to the end of our time, and I'm not sure if it's German time or Nordic time or whichever we should hold on to. I'd love to keep talking about this forever, but I would like to ask each of you, in your own words, to explain to me and to the audience as well, if you can, what makes media music education distinct in Nordic countries? What is special about how we look at teaching in Nordic countries? Or perhaps there is not a distinction.
Oh, what I see is a difference between the education in Denmark, Sweden, and Norway is that we, to a large degree, involve the film studies into the film. That we are part of the film studies, as opposed to many other film scoring programs around the world, where there, as I told you, they don't cooperate. I think that would be the Nordic method.
Do you think that it's something that external, like other European students, would be able to see as distinct, or is that a good future? Then we have time for just one question. I'm afraid not, but I think, like I was saying before, 6 colleagues here will have no shortage of things to talk about. I hope that this conversation can go on outside here and beyond as well. It's been an absolute pleasure to have this very brief opportunity to meet all of you and talk about this. Hopefully it's been enriching for all of you, and thank you very much for attending.